So before I start with the panel, let me ask a couple of doctors on the floor, you know, what are your challenges to scale up? Any two guys, in just 2 words, what are the real challenges that you face when you think of scaling up?
So I have walked away from 3-4 investors during my last 25 years, every time. The biggest challenge I feel is that when we evolved our businesses in India, more or less, this is a general statement, we entered a time when there was not a proper business practice. So many of, as he would say, we were all mom and pop shops. So for example, someone in my unit, my junior assistant comes and says, oh, doctor, I made a mistake. I used to say, okay, forget it, I'll internalize it. So when I came to the time or point when I was going to sign my deal with Renuka Ramanathan, there was a disclosure clause. And on the non-disclosure clause, I said no, because, so the problem is now, the times have changed. Now when you start your businesses, you start them with a proper business practice, then you can scale the business. Because I felt that if I take an investor, at that point in time, it would not be unethical because I internalized so many mistakes that my juniors did. Will a CEO today say, okay, I will internalize? He will say, no, disclose it. This is the biggest problem in India because we have come from an environment which was chaotic. Now the new businesses that start right from beginning, they start in a proper fashion and so they can be scalable. We were in an era where we had this chaotic start in our business. So the disclosure clause was a big hindrance when Nandita said, no, we are looking back, there have been mistakes, we have internalized them. So what do I do? What do I tell Renuka? That you understand, so that was one hurdle. And the second one, which I feel now, if I scale up, I can easily scale up, let me tell you. I can take my business to 100 centers in 1 year's time. What is the problem? If I take a unit, and if there is a mistake in the unit, I have a signature, I do an agreement with that unit and say that if there's a problem, I as the head is not responsible for your mistake. If there's a mistake, they will always, the Indian government will always target the head, even though there is a proper signature. So if you are franchising, you need to, I feel you need to, and this is an advice to all of you, investors, you will be liable. So you must control the business. You don't rely on them. They will do it their way. You have to bring in systems and control the business. Otherwise, the liability will come to you.
So, thank you for putting it in perspective. I mean, if I have to summarize what you just said, transparency and credibility, that's what you were commenting on, right? We have another one. But ma'am, please be cognizant of the time.
Just take a minute. I am Dr. Kanti Bansal from Ahmedabad. I feel that very good IVF specialists in India are underused. Because if a specialist is good, at least 100 cases per month that person has to do. But the only hitch I find in scaling up with investors is, already as we see in the corporate level also, I feel then the charges will be more for the patient and which may, have a hindrance in the upscale of the setup. That's what I feel.
Utilization, you say. Right. So, sorry, ma'am. I have to go on with the panel. And we have investors here. So, please. So, having heard to the audience, now each one of you, why don't you briefly introduce your fund, what kind of investment size you are managing, and what percentage of it goes into healthcare? Starting with you.
So, I run Lincoln International's presence in India. Lincoln International is a global investment bank. So, we are not the investors, we are the advisors. And I have a little more advantage that I have now, as we speak, we are working on 4 transactions in 4 different geographies in the world where I'm leading those transactions, which are from $100 million to around $500 million in IVF. As it progresses from India to West, right, in GCC, UK, and US. So we can talk about it later, but we don't invest, we advise. We don't risk capital.
Thanks, Dr. Anuj. So I am Abhishek. I represent Cordia Capital. We are a healthcare-focused fund. We invest across South and Southeast Asia. Till date, we've invested about $1.5 billion, managed that capital. For us, healthcare is healthcare delivery, pharmaceutical, medical devices, technology, and retail plays, which are primarily home healthcare, dialysis chain, the new age retail models.
So all 1.5 billion in healthcare, you mean to say?
Largely, majority of it is in healthcare. Now we are only a healthcare-focused fund.
Great, great. Vishal?
Yeah, thank you, Anuj. It's a pleasure to be here. So I head AHH, which is Asia Healthcare Holdings. That's a single specialty operating platform that's funded by TPG Growth. And I also work as a senior advisor with TPG Growth.
Good afternoon. I had Brand Capital. I think several of you know Brand Capital since it's one of the largest investment pools in India in brands. We are part of the Times Group. We invest in a variety of companies, practically any company that requires media to grow and build a brand is fair game for us in any sector. So if you ask me what percentage of our portfolio is healthcare, I can't hazard an exact percentage, but I would say it would perhaps mirror healthcare as a percentage of India's GDP, probably in around a 10% range. Having said that, any healthcare model that requires branding with the end consumer is something that we invest in. We have invested in IVF as well.
Hi, I represent Tata Capital, and we have a dedicated pharma healthcare fund. The first fund was a $70 million fund, and we've invested across delivery, pharmaceuticals, discovery, and we are now raising the next fund, which is a $200 million fund. Again, focused on healthcare and pharma.
Wow, I mean 10 to 100%, and we are talking about serious money. Let's explore why they haven't or have invested in IVF. So I'll start with Abhishek. I mean, your fund is strongly focused in healthcare. What is your global perspective on healthcare, and how do you compare India as a market versus globe as a market?
Sure. So we are very excited about healthcare, particularly in Asia. We firmly believe that the global center of gravity for healthcare industry is rapidly shifting from the west to east. And just to put numbers into context, in less than 10 years, we expect the total healthcare spend in Asia to be $4.3 trillion. Now that is the combined healthcare spend of US and Europe today. So that to us is an attractive opportunity. And India being a large portion of the Asian healthcare landscape is going to drive and is going to ride along the same wave. Talking about a little bit about more on Indian healthcare space, so while the overall macros are attractive, there are 2 or 3 fundamental drivers which differentiates India from its global peers, as well as it is constructing its growth or is providing a platform to play. And these have been covered earlier in Mitesh's presentation, that we are largely a privately funded healthcare system where large portions is funded out of pocket. So that creates an affordability challenge. The second one is that there's a consolidated play where majority of clinical staff as well as clinical setups are in tier 1 cities and state capitals. So from an access perspective, that's again a thing that has to be addressed. And the third one is because of limited use of digitization, EHRs, there is little to no accountability, and that has an impact on quality of care. So those are 2, 3 drivers which will evolve the healthcare space in India over the next 5 to 10 years. And coming to your question, the third part on multi and single specialty, while multi will continue to hold majority of the healthcare space, we are very bullish on the single specialty because we feel that it has the capacity and ability to address all the 3.
Great, great. So, in your discussion, you just laid out a couple of opportunities, which are probably the challenges. So I'll take this question to Gaurav. We have heard Dr. Pai down there talking about transparency, credibility. Now here, Abhishek talks about access, affordability, mapping and all. So as an advisor, why would you advise your clients to invest in healthcare, and specifically when it boils down to single specialities wherein the documentation is not that great, regulatory control is not that great.
So regulatory control, as far as the entire healthcare piece or single specialty is concerned, we are limiting ourselves to the IVF, because elsewhere there is. So, if we are talking about IVF, uh, look, I mean, the way we look at it from advising our clients, we would rather work for someone who has respect for 5 things, or rather 3 broad things. So ethics, transparency is the broad 1, and third is the safety. So, and doctors out here very well know what I mean by all the 3. And I mean, we are working with a chain which talks about all that. So we would rather back someone or go and represent someone and also convince the investor to invest in this kind of a business which talks about these 3 and which is already scaled up and which understands what is scaling up.
So, you come with a strong global investment portfolio when it comes to IVF. How do you see it changing, or how your approach or advice changes when it comes to Indian centers?
So, I mean, advice doesn't change. I mean, quite frankly, if I look at the 4 today transactions that we are running at different stages, all talk about these 3 tenets. 4th, which is the biggest one, is the governance. So, any investor, besides looking at these 3, will also look at the governance. And what Dr. Pai highlighted was also governance. It was all about governance. Where you internalize something was governance. So, and as we move from India to UAE, to UK, to US, the governance is paramount. So in UAE, I mean, they don't even allow egg donation, or donors are not allowed in UAE. It's a difficult market. So besides that, in UK, it is part government paid, part self-pay. US is again insurance. But again, all the 3 areas, if I look at it, if I segment the markets, and the way we look at also, and the investors will look at, is the scalability. How do you scale up? Then, 3 areas what one should look at is awareness. What is the awareness level of the IVF itself in different markets? So apart from that, what is the social requirement or social need or a social pressure to actually bring in family or grow family? So if we look at that metrics, then India falls low on average, below average or low on the awareness side, but very high on the social pressures. If we look at as developed market as US, so it is very average on awareness, which is contradictory to what you would all feel or believe that US must be high on awareness. It's not. So, but it's also very average on social pressures. If you look at the other markets like Japan, I mean, awareness is high, but social requirement to go and raise family is low. China is very different. So is Europe. So different markets have will bring in different scalability, and all these markets, if you look at it, there are not many companies which are private equity invested, but what is happening in different markets is consolidation. US is a big consolidation play. India will see that sooner than later once you have strong private equity investing into larger chains. So I think the basic tenets don't be different in different markets when you want to represent anyone.
So Vishal, quickly, just building on what Gaurav said, low awareness, high social pressure. How do you define the market? You have invested in motherhood, right? So what were the drivers, and what are the challenges that you foresee when it comes to pure investment mindset in mother care or IVF?
Sure, Anuj. So let me take you through the entire thesis with which we built AHH, right? So I've led multi-specialty healthcare all my life. I've been in healthcare now for about 27, 28 years. And all along, the focus has been a lot on multi-specialty hospitals and multi-specialty healthcare delivery systems. 2 years back, 2.5 years back, we felt that this was probably the right opportunity at the right time to sort of put together a platform where we not just incubate, but we also grow single specialty businesses or single specialty healthcare delivery systems all under one platform, right? And this is unprecedented in this industry. And the reason for that being that if you look at the entire transformation of the Indian healthcare sector over the last many years, and if you look at the last 3 decades, it was very clear that there were certain specialties which were coming out of the large format multi-specialty hospitals and getting into the single specialty businesses. Ophthalmology was actually the first one that came out, right? Mother and child was the second one that came out. Orthopedics came out. Cardiology came out. So the transition is out there for all of us to see. I don't think it's a no-brainer to see that ultimately what will be left inside the large format multi-specialty entities will be the very high intensive care environments, which are life and death situations. So with that thought, we basically built around this entire concept that how do we sort of take some early stage companies and help them to grow. Motherhood happened to be one of them. There was another one which is in the cancer space, and I'll talk about that too. So Motherhood was 3 centers 2016 when we went in and took a majority control of that business. Today, Motherhood is 13 centers around the country. We have integrated Motherhood not just from, and that's the difference, right? Because when you start taking a look at a company from the outside in, and you see what that company is doing right now, and what should that company be doing from a clinical orientation and from a clinical integration perspective. So what we saw Motherhood doing at that given point in time was a lot more obstetrics. My vision around Motherhood was that we need to complete and have under one roof a complete women's hospital. And a women's hospital would eventually mean that you do obstetrics, gynecology, you do neonatology, pediatrics, and you do IVF, because that completes the entire chain that you need to really present when it comes to a women's hospital. And that's exactly what's happening inside our Motherhood box today. Very different from what we inherited that box with. Likewise, on the oncology side, it was 1 center in Hyderabad in 2016. We now have 12 centers across South Asia. So I think the question, therefore, is that single specialty and then IVF, and why I believe that IVF is the next one. Number one, when we look at an integrated mother and child space, I think IVF is a very clear add-on, and it needs to be there because it just completes the entire chain. Second, I think the clinical talent that we have within the mother and child space, which is mainly gynecologists, and along with that, you have the entire IVF specialist group. You've again completed a full chain, right? So, doctor was saying that there are about 30,000 gynecologists. Out of that, at Motherhood itself today, we have close to about 250 gynecologists working. So why wouldn't I look at an IVF chain and say that doesn't it really complement what you're doing? Right. And so I think we basically have a very strong conviction around IVF. We are in the process, and we will probably, very quickly announce a very large acquisition that we are doing at AHH level, which is one of the largest IVF businesses in this country. And that completes the entire chain, which we started to build out in 2016.
Let's catch up on the last one specifically. So Sam, we have Vishal here, who says that one-stop shop is the way forward for him. He believes strongly into that. You have invested in Cocoon, which is a specialty side of it. So how does that how does that complement or negotiates your vision about a single specialty or one-stop shop? And what has brand to do with your decision when you invest?
You see, multi-specialty is very key when you are trying to build a large revenue box, $200, $300, $400 million company, strong growth, EBITDA, et cetera, right? That is the way you're able to amortize your fixed costs over a very large, diverse set of revenue sources. And it absorbs all kinds of cycles inside it, and you're able to grow. And every society, every developing or developed country, doesn't really matter, needs multi-specialty places. There's no doubt about it. Single specialty is important in specific things, specific areas, where that such specialty can be plucked out of a multi-specialty and provided in a safe space, in a very organized and eloquent way that the patient can appreciate and pay a little bit extra for it. That's very important, all right? Having said that, if you go to California, where I'm from, Stanford, which is a very large multi-specialty center, also has an IVF facility inside it, which is extremely good. So it's not to say that a multi-specialty facility can't do a specialty like IVF inside it in an amazing way. The truth is there's room for both, all right? As far as we are concerned, brand capital, we are brand capital for India. We are agnostic. We have 850 investments. So we're not like a healthcare fund that invests only in healthcare, so we got to worry about this and that. We will invest in anything in healthcare that can scale and that requires branding. And we heard about transparency, we heard about trust. What is a brand? Brand owns those things. The brand owns the transparency and trust. And when it's a doctor-run facility, just run by a doctor, which is what you go to. When I'm not well, I say I want to go call Dr. Parker. That is my brand. It is Dr. Parker. That's it. But then when you are thinking about scaling it, when you say Stanford, Stanford is a brand, all right? It's gone away from an individual doctor, at which point you don't ask Dr. Parker's name in Stanford. You're willing to meet just about anybody. When you've reached that size, that's when Nitesh would tell you here, Vishal would tell you here, that you get a big P multiple at your exit, which is what we are aiming to do. So from our point of view, anything that can carry that trust, that transparency, that high quality of service, that patient care inside a brand, we are willing to invest in, which is what we have done in IVF.
Great. I'll hold your thought when you just discussed about brands. Let's hold that one up. Between you two, multi-specialty. I'm sure you do. So between you two, multi-specialty and single specialty, how the ROI expectations change?
So, Anuj, and I would like to comment on, I was listening to the conversation in the previous panel, and somebody turned around and said, investors should not expect any returns when they're making an investment. And I was wondering that I wish God gave me money every day in the morning and said, now listen, son, you don't have to give any of this back, so just go and blow it up, right? I think it's important to understand that capital does not come free for anybody, right? And capital has to be sourced, capital has to be deployed, capital has to be returned, capital has to go behind companies to achieve their growth, and fundamentally, capital basically goes behind those entities which can demonstrate the ability to grow, ability to have the right management talent, ability to be able to foresee in the next 5 years where that enterprise should be. And that is where capital goes. And from a private equity perspective, the IRR returns, whether it is multi-specialty, single specialty, anybody, the minimum that one expects is a 25% IRR. It ranges anywhere from 25% upwards to 30%. So I think there is no free capital. And the thought of free capital does not exist. So please don't even think about it, right?
Vamesh, 25% of free capital. And Sam, single specialty. Just a quick comment from Vamesh, and then I'm coming back to you.
Sorry, so what's
25% of IRR. Is it happening in Indian healthcare?
Well, at least we've delivered it in our first fund.
I must congratulate.
No, because ultimately, as Vishal rightly said, there is no free lunch. And somebody in the earlier panel said that we need patient capital. Yes, private equity is patient capital, but patient with a certain limit. It cannot be like time immemorial. And what happens invariably we've seen, and which is what unfortunately has been the state of India private equity, where India private equity has taken in a lot more capital than it has given out. And why has that happened? Is because of the fact that ultimately exit timelines get extended out, IRRs get killed, and therefore then you are basically killing the ecosystem of private equity. So when I am looking at these deals, when I'm looking at IVF, I scratch my head and wonder, saying, okay, I have a 4-year time window. What is it that's going to deliver to me? And lo and behold, you have a whole bunch of private equity guys chasing up these assets. The valuations go up off the roof. And then finally, then we are all twiddling our thumbs at 12 and 15% IRRs. We don't get paid for that.
So beautifully put. So coming back to you, Sam, now. After having heard Vishal here and then Vamesh over there, single specialty, IRR expectations, brand value. What is your take?
I'm a cash on cash guy.
That's everyone. I think everyone wants to be that.
I don't do IRR. I want to make 3 times my money in 3 years. You guys, okay? You guys do the math on that, whatever that IRR is.
It's more than 20.
I know. It always is. Now, here's the way I look at it. I have looked, if you look at all the sectors where I've invested, healthcare is one sector where I've developed deep knowledge from diligencing, spending a lot of time, but making few investments. Let me explain to you why. All you doctors are amazing people. Every time I meet one of you, I just sit in your office for the whole day. The amount of stuff that you know, it's incredible. That's your blessing and that's your curse. The blessing is you guys take a Hippocratic oath, you do an amazing job with your patient, all right? But we also heard today about returns are not important. Every human being is a rational economic animal deep inside us, whether we acknowledge it or not, because when you go to buy a Starbucks coffee, they ask you to pay for it. It ain't free. So the reality is we have to make money, we have to make a return. If there is a business that tells, I don't make money, we should run really far away from it. Not just investors, everybody should. Even a patient should run away. Okay, if something is free, be really scared of it, all right? Because you're getting some problem with it, all right? Just be absolutely sure of that. What I'll say is this, I see a chasm between the way the doctors think, this is my experience, where the doctors think about service-mindedness, Hippocratic oath, delivering value, and making money. Somehow, in their formation, there is this expectation that if you make money, you're not doing this. Absolutely wrong. You could make decent money, good returns, in a fair way, by still delivering good quality, consistency, and happiness for all your patients. It is entirely possible to do it, but somehow, there is this myth that sits in there, and it's a job of us, the investor community, to come in, to work hard, to cooperate with the doctors and dispel that myth and prove to you that such returns can be made. And in the United States, there are several companies in healthcare over the years that have produced very good IRRs. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. And we will be one that will produce very good cash-on-cash returns in everything we are doing in India.
So Anuj, let me add to what Sam is saying, because I think this is a critical point around this discussion. Indian healthcare delivery has taken about $5 billion of private equity capital. If you take a look at the entire healthcare delivery ecosystem, there is no scaled up healthcare delivery business in this country which has not been backed by private equity over the last couple of decades. So just go back and see, these were founders like yourselves who actually went in early, created a mindset of growth that they wanted their enterprises to deliver on, went and took external capital, and used it to grow great companies. And this is exactly what this ecosystem is all about. The entire ecosystem of private equity is basically funding enterprises so that they can grow from an idea, execute on that idea, and actually scale up to a large enterprise. And if you're able to do that, I'm sure both as a clinician and as a founder, you will have great satisfaction. And then it's not a function of how much capital I need, what is the kind of return I need to give, because if you take that entity on the right path, believe me, the returns that private equity is actually looking for behind your enterprises, that return will come automatically, because that's a function of scalability and execution. And if you deliver on that execution, it's a no-brainer. So this country actually has been very lucky in more ways than one that the whole healthcare ecosystem is actually funded by private equity. And we don't really, understand that till the time we are told about it, that that's the true reality.
Wow. I mean, the roadmap is clear. Doctors? Quickly moving to this side of the table. I mean, Sam here talked about brand. And, brand can be a doctor, can be a multi-chain specialty clinic, multi-chain, multi-speciality hospital, anything, right? So you being as an advisor and you being as an investor, how would you consider where your money should go? A doctor who's a brand or a brand which is a center, I mean, a delivery center?
Sure. So a doctor is always good to have, but from where we come from and building on what Vishal said and Sam said, that we have a defined horizon. We have a defined investment period. 4 to 5 years in, we want to build the business, help them scale up, and then exit. At that point of time, we need to build a brand which is more than the doctor, and doctor being part of the system rather than being the system itself. So that's the view that we have.
Yeah, I mean, just adding to that, you can start with a doctor, but you have to build a sustainable, governed, scalable business. So sooner than later, the ESG would be knocking our doors. And if we really talk about ESG and measure the companies on ESG, the investors will very fairly gauge who to invest with. So yes, I mean, doctor can be a brand, but ultimately they need to build an institution which is scalable and sustainable and well governed.
Great. So we have just about 3 minutes left. So let me, quickly go to each one of you. 2 words on setting the expectations for the doctors over here. Why you will invest in them, or what you are expecting out of them.
Well, that's 2 words is a tough one, but I can only say one thing, that we've looked at IVF in the past. We continue to seriously evaluate it because at least on some of the financial metrics, it looks very good. Though I'm a minority in my own team, I think one of the big challenges that we face is the scalability, as we call about it. My definition of scalability is the fact that how much can that existing one asset can sort of sweat and generate the revenues. Moment you talk about saying, oh, I'm going to be putting up some 25 centers, trust me, it's a big nightmare in terms of an operational challenge. And therefore, I would rather go out and back a business in IVF which is going deeper across the verticals, which is the example which Vishal just gave about the fact that do gynac, do obstetrics, where I'm able to create a value chain around the proposition of who the patient is, rather than having this mega idea of saying, okay, I'm going to be a 50-center place. To me, that worries me as an investor.
Sam?
I'm sticking with 2 words. Laser focus, all right? Each one of you are extremely good at what you're trained and what you're doing. You have 1 center, you have 2 centers, you have 3 centers, it doesn't matter. Success will beget success. So if you're able to deliver a 64% of your cycles that delivers a baby, such a beautiful thing. A baby, you guys do this amazing thing. I mean, my regular doctors cure a cold or a fever or something. You guys deliver a beautiful thing. It's really amazing. And if somebody here gets a 55, 58, 60%, it doesn't matter. All this money will be chasing you, all right? So all you need is to just focus on the one thing that you wake up to do every day, deliver babies. You just focus on that and the money will automatically come. We will find you guys wherever you are. You cannot hide from us. We will find you.
So from the time that Louis Brown was born, about 40 years back, that's when your industry really started, right? There are about 6 million kids who have been born worldwide through IVF technology. We have not even touched the tip of the iceberg as far as this sector is concerned. And when you look at Asia and the rest of the world world is growing, IVF services are growing at a CAGR of about 9% Asia is growing at a CAGR of about 12 to 14%. So it's a no-brainer again that this is the vertical of the future to be expanded, to be grown, to be invested behind, with the right clinicians behind them, and with the ability to grow organizations around them. I think my big takeaway over here and what I would like to really genuinely talk to each one of you about is that you have the thought in your head. You are a great entrepreneur because of who you are. But ultimately, if you have to raise capital, you have to grow an organization around yourself. And it's ultimately the organization that gets funded. So it is important that as you want to scale and grow, that you also grow an organization around yourself, because that's truly what will get funded into the future. And from our perspective, we are big believers in IVF.
Sure. So I think I'll touch on two things. It won't be two words. One, we've spoken about transparency, and Gaurav mentioned about ESG. So from that perspective, to build an ethics of care and quality of care. So focus on those two elements from a care transparency perspective, because that delivers a lot of confidence to the investors, that delivers a lot of confidence to even the patient, and as a result has a confounding impact on patient experience, quality of care. And the second part about scalability of building businesses is on project execution. So while you would want to invest and grow into multiple centers, you have to have a focus on center by center, region by region, focus on building, investing behind brand, technology, so that you are ready on the back end to be able to scale up.
So you've heard all these investors talk what they want. So build a vision to build an institution, these guys will back you. That's what I want to say.
Great. Sweet and simple. So, I heard somewhere, I love it when a plan falls together. It is a movie dialogue. I love it when a panel, agrees with one another. No debates. So I would have loved to take questions from your side, but we are unfortunately short of time. So I'll thank all the panel members over here. Your views were extremely, extremely helpful. And I think, we have been able to give a vision to the doctors sitting over here. Thank you so much, guys.